Today, I would like to talk about denial. Denial is probably the most salient facet of addiction. And I totally relate to denial myself. Many years ago, when I was still drinking, I couldn't imagine not drinking. It's kind of like if I stepped out into my backyard and I looked at the moon and I just thought in terms of jumping to the moon, you know? Like, sure, I could maybe jump a foot or two off the ground, but to be able to actually jump to the moon, I just couldn't imagine it. And kind of almost similarly, I just couldn't imagine being without drinking. Like, yeah, I could imagine going a day or two or a week maybe, but you know, but going the rest of my life without drinking, I just couldn't imagine it. So I was kind of like forced into denial. I had to deny that I needed it because to admit that I had a problem meant that I had to do something about it. And I couldn't imagine not drinking. So denial is, I totally understand denial. But I just want to tell you a story about denial. And I'm going to use a fictitious character, and I'll call him Joe Blow. Joe Blow was your typical raging alcoholic. Joe Blow lived at home with his parents, and sometimes he would get so drunk till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. He'd wake up in the morning, and there's no way he could go to work. So he would ask his mother, "Mom, would you call in to work and tell him I'm sick?" So his mother would call up and say, "Joe has the flu. He's just feeling terrible. He won't be making it in today." Therefore, becoming an enabler and denying his problem. Joe sometimes would drink and drive, drunk out of his mind. And one day he smashed into another car. No one was really hurt, but still there was a lot of damage. Joe's expensive lawyer got him off for failure to yield, therefore, kind of denying the fact that he was drunk and an alcoholic. And Joe ended up in his 20s getting married, but that didn't last long, a couple years, but because he was always drunk and sometimes even abusive. So his wife just couldn't take it anymore. So she left him and she filed for divorce. The reason being irreconcilable differences, therefore denying his problem. And Joe ended up getting fired from his job because he was always showing up drunk, and he was really an embarrassment to the company when he was drunk, even while he was working. But they didn't fire him for being a drunk. They fired him because they said his job was no longer necessary, therefore denying his problem. Finally, in his 30s, being a raving alcoholic, he died. And on his death certificate, his doctor said he died of liver disease, therefore denying his problem. And I just told you that story, which is a typical alcoholic story, because not only did Joe spend his entire life denying his problem, like every alcoholic does, but so did everybody else. All of society denies the problem of alcoholism. And this is true of other addictions. Denial is truly ubiquitous. And denial takes on many forms, like codependency. People become codependent, and I've seen it so many times. People come totally, absolutely codependent on their children, even though their children are getting older and leaving home. They still hang on to this codependency. People get a sense of worth by being codependent on their children because it's not their own self-worth. They see their worth through their children's eyes. And people get a sense of worth in non-relationship relationships, keeping the whole world at arm's length, except for the dysfunctional relationships that they have. Some people, rather than um, coping with life, like to engage in running away from reality by doing things like, say, for example, buying houses or moving. I've known many people who, I don't know, they move every year or every 2 or every 3 years, they move. And this is kind of like a form of denial. So rather than dealing with their problems, rather than dealing with their issues, they just move. It's kind of a form of denial. And they never deal with these feelings of being worthless or being alone by simply running away and engaging in things like buying houses. 20 years from now, these people will still be alone and feeling worthless. And what will they do? You guessed it. We can move. Therefore, denying what they have to do. And you really can't blame people for being that way because they genuinely don't know, because society doesn't teach us how to deal with our trauma and with our shame and the things that caused us to be an alcoholic and to begin with. So what we're really trying to do is escape the pain. So, by moving, we're just trying the best we can to escape the pain. And for a moment, it kind of works. It was just interesting. I just yesterday I was watching a documentary on Tiger Woods, and he was a tremendous philanderer. You know, he seemed to have everything. He was a great athlete, a great golfer. He married a beautiful wife, and he had kids. And he just, from all intents and purposes, seemed to have his life totally together. But he didn't. And he was a philanderer. He used to go to Las Vegas, and he had all kinds of women, And one of his friends said, I thought it was so interesting. One of his friends said that, yeah, he was trying to escape just for a moment that pain that he felt, you know? And in addictions, we understand this. What we're trying to do when we when we drink, is we're trying to escape the pain. And when we move, when some people move, every year or 2 or 3, they're just trying to escape the pain. So I totally understand it. I totally get why people are in denial. So it's totally understandable. But still, if we are going to become the people we were meant to be, we have to, we have to stop just relating these things because they are so ubiquitous and flagrant, the denial. We have to step up to the plate and deal with these issues. Still, we have to come to terms with denial if we are going to become the people that we are meant to be. And one of the things that I have learned, that if we are going to become the people we're meant to be, if we're going to deal with the denial, which keeps us enslaved, is we can't do it alone. We need other people, because addiction denial is just too powerful for us. We just don't have the capacity on our own to deal with it. We need other people. And in all my dealings with recovery, I found this to be true in just about every case that I've worked with and I've known. And I know it's so true in my life. And in my life, there are so many people that helped me on the path. There were dozens and dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of people, if I were to count them all, that helped me on my path. People from all different walks of life. And one of the other things, if we're going to deal with denial, is we have to come out of hiding and we have to become honest. That is one of the biggest keys of all, is coming out of denial, and that's honesty. On the one hand, we have denial, and then on the other hand, we have honesty. Denial, honesty. Darkness, light. 98% of people who are addicts, will never recover. And that's kind of like the bottom line. Most people will never recover because an inability basically to be honest, to admit that they have a problem and to be willing to do what you have to do to recover. And I commiserate greatly with people that are struggling with it. Like I've done a lot of work with Gabor Mate, who worked on the East End of Vancouver with the addicts. And it's so rare that anyone ever recovers because these people are they've been so traumatized and they're so filled with shame. And it's so difficult to ever recover. So most people just spend their life trying to do the best they can by dealing with this shame and trauma by, well, whether it's using or moving from house to house or running away or whatever it is. And it's so totally normal because people just don't know. And people aren't educated to help people to deal with these things. So it's kind of like the prophet said, broad is the way that leads to destruction, because narrow is the way that leads to life, and few there are that find it. And this is a principle in addictions that is just so absolutely true. But still, there are the few. And there actually are many of us, millions of us, when you take in the scope of the whole world, that have learned to deal with addictions and are doing so much better and are a light to everybody else. And this is the world that I am involved with. And because it is possible. And like I say, it's a choice, but you have to choose that you're going to be honest. And that's the first thing, because if you can't be honest, then there's nobody on earth that can help you. And you will just continue to let your ego guide you to do whatever it is to cope the best that you can, whether it's just continuing to use or whether it's, buying houses or whatever you do. And if you are on that path, it's not easy, but it's the greatest journey you'll ever be. And it will take all the love you can give it every day of your life for as long as you live. But if you're on that path, you will be soaring and you wouldn't choose anything else. But you have to get on that path. And as time goes by, it gets better and better and better. But it's not easy, I'll admit that. Anyway, that's just what I wanted to talk to you today about was denial. And I'm going to be continuing this over the next about 5 podcasts. And I'm going to be talking about the most important word in dealing with addictions. The most important word in dealing with addictions. And I'm going to be talking about the path to freedom. The path to freedom. And I'm going to talk about making it to the mountaintop. And I'm going to be talking about 12 steps in a nutshell. So anyway, there's some exciting stuff coming up. And that's it for today. So we'll see you next time.